They did a study like in Australia years ago with 70-year-olds, and they started 70-year-olds weight training, and like the health benefits were like astronomical. And then in lifting in the IPF, the Australia team was dominating the masters 70 and over because they got into powerlifting after they started doing this study, and like they have this huge, stronger age group now, which I just think is amazing. Like it's just never too late. I mean, that's just like that's just so neat.
All right, we're on. We're recording now, ready to roll here with Jen Thompson. Thanks so much for joining the show, Jen. Appreciate you jumping on today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of digging on you. I did not know this. So, were you, unless my research is wrong, are you from Southfield, Michigan originally?
Well, I was born in Southfield. I grew up in Rochester, Michigan, outside Detroit. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I was at the Avon and Rochester Road. I worked
Oh,
over there lifetime for, gosh, 10 plus years. I was
oh
probably
yeah. That's
eight.
in my old stomping grounds for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah. I
was
went
like
to Rochester High School, and then we lived in Royal Oak while I was in college, and then we moved down to Charlotte.
gotcha. Yeah. So now did you go to college in North Carolina?
No, I went to Oakland University in
You went to
Michigan.
Oakland.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I was, like I said, I was going through some things, and for the listeners out there that don't know, so I just kind of, I had to like check the list about 7 times because it's 57 world records, 67 national titles. Well, you won the Arnold Classic 27 times. Do I have those stats right, or is it updated
It
since then?
it's around that. Maybe my husband has this Google spreadsheet that says Gen results, and it's like everything since 1999. So usually, I'll refer back to that if I need like a number, but it sounds close.
Yeah, I think I may have cheated and stole that off your Instagram, one of your clips on there.
Yeah.
So I had to do some digging. I was like, I have been to the Arnold maybe like 20% of the times you won the Arnold. So that's pretty
That's
impressive.
pretty good. Well, the
Um,
Arnold, we have several events. I lived in
yeah,
like 2 or 3 of them, so that's why there's so many titles.
gotcha. No, appreciate that. Well, I thought we could kind of like just get in because I think what's really interesting, and again, just looking at your transition, I would like, because there's like a lot of people out there, but especially, I think it's more prominent with women where maybe they're like endurance runners or different view of health and fitness and what that looks like. And they also think, some may think, lifting heavy or the traditional look of a quote unquote power lifter, someone who's
Mhm.
explosive and strong, what that look is like. They may have a vision in their mind.
Sure.
And then someone like yourself kind of, in my view, actually like kind of shatters that vision, um, that might be out there. And I just thought we could kind of walk through your journey from starting. Um, I believe, if I understand correctly, too, you were in long distance running first. Is that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then
I was.
kind of transitioned, and like to get into that story a little bit. If I understand correctly, that's when, is it when you met your husband, Donovan? Is it when you started to get into
Yeah.
powerlifting?
Yeah, I did a lot of running in high school, like cross country and track. I was fairly good at it. And then I did a bunch of road races with my dad. My dad was a long distance runner for my whole life. And so it was kind of something I could do with him. But then when I got into college, like I didn't love it so much. And I had met my husband, Donovan, who, this is back in the 90s where there wasn't a lot of gyms. And
Yeah,
so we actually had our own gym, like our own little home gym that he and his buddies had created. And
nice.
so he invited me to start, doing some weight training, and I was pretty resistant to it for a while, but eventually I gave in and then loved it.
That's awesome. What, so talk about like, what was the kind of home? Was it a basement gym, garage
Yeah,
gym? What was it,
it was
basement?
a basement gym, like in this Michigan basements, so we're not talking
Oh
about
yeah.
like a nice one. And we had it down in our rental house in college. There was several of us that lived in this little rental home, and we had it. We never got our security deposit back because we really messed up that place with that gym. But it was, yeah, it was just like, hardcore stuff, and we really didn't know what we were doing. We were doing these crazy, like Mark Philippi kind of like training routines that you could never possibly finish because you were just so like overtrained by the end of it. But it was like, looking back, it was like a great time. I didn't start right away because I was pretty intimidated. It was all guys, lifting
Sure.
down there. It was a bunch of gym bros and they're playing a lot of music. And I was just this little skinny long distance runner. And although they were very inviting, like I was just very resistant to it at first, but then finally, like I never really loved long distance running. I did it just to keep in shape,
Sure.
and do something with my dad. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this a try. And they were so welcoming, inviting me, and really just showed me how to do everything. And I kind of got the bug after that. And I really started because, and it's probably not the best reason to start, but like I was a real skinny, shapeless little girl. And Donovan told me like if I started lifting weights, I could get shoulders and pecs and a butt.
All good.
And I
Yeah.
was like, sounds good. Let's
There you
go.
go.
And true to that time, when you saw muscular women, it was the bodybuilder women that
Right.
were on a lot of steroids, and they just
Sure.
didn't look feminine at all. And so there definitely was that, like, I don't want to look like that, and they were like, you won't look like that.
Yeah. And so were you, gosh, were you in Royal Oak then? Is that
Yep, we were in Royal
okay?
Oak, yeah.
And what is it called? Was it just Royal Oak Gym? There's a powerlifting gym there, if I recall correctly.
Now there is. Back then, I
There,
mean, we powerhouses were just starting to come up. Like that was all
gotcha.
there was.
I
I don't even know if we had a local gym, honestly. Mostly it was like racquetball clubs,
oh yeah,
where
yeah.
you would have like a VHW call or something like that, where they have like a universal machine or something. Like there was no like free weights to go lift in.
Yeah, I wanna say it was the late '90s when I originally joined a gym, and I wanna say I competed in APF in 2002, I think.
Hmm.
They had, like, the one at the Metro Beach or whatever, that used to happen here in Michigan, and I remember back then seeing all the West Side guys came up, and there was guys from I don't know if you ever heard of, like, Weight Station in Michigan? The
Mm-mm.
Weight Station was, like, a lifting club, and I guess those guys, like, hated each other.
Oh, the rivals, gym
Yeah.
rivals.
Oh, yeah, and then, like, 10 years later, 15 years later, I saw a lot of content with, like, Louis Simmons and West Side and all that, and I was like, "I think that rings a bell," and I just didn't
Yeah.
connect, like, who it was back then, and the guy at Weight Station, there was a guy that was, like, Louis' age, and they used to go at it, I guess, back in, like, the
Mm,
'80s, so that's where a lot of
funny.
it came from, so it's kinda
Yeah.
funny because and I know you've been on Table Talks, with Dave Tate. I was on
Yeah.
there with Justin Harris, is a good friend of mine. I've known him for like 20 years, and we had a supplement company for a while together. And we were on there anyway. Short along, we were just kind of talking about the battle between the states and all that stuff. And it's just kind of cool to like hear some of that where it came from, and then to see like how much the sport has grown
Sure. Yeah.
from that standpoint. And a lot like I wanted to get your input on this too because obviously your followers, your accounts, your exposure has been, from my view at least, because I've seen you a couple years ago, so I feel like it's grown quite a bit, which is really
Yep.
good to see. And then I also see like the last, I don't know if it, maybe I'm a little off on this, but 7 to 10 years, like women's strength sports seems to be really, is really kind of picked up. Is that something that I guess my question would be, where do you think some of that started to kind of really hockey stick a little bit more? And why is it, what are some things you saw just through the years and specifically in like women's strength training?
Right. I think for us, well, one is like you mentioned, the social media aspect. There's so much exposure out there now where you can really see what athletic women look like and what they do, opposed to like, blown up things in a magazine. So you can see that in strength sports, we have all straight, all shapes and sizes, and we maintain our femininity. And that's the one thing I've loved about powerlifting forever is it
Yeah.
really celebrates all body types.
Right.
If you've got thick thighs, that's amazing. I'm so jealous of it.
Yeah.
Not thinking you got cottage cheese thighs and you should get rid of them. We're like, man, I bet you can squat a lot of weight. I wish I had those legs. So I think the body positivity part and then the exposure has been huge. I do think like the one of the catalysts was CrossFit. um, we saw an explosion in powerlifting
Yeah,
once CrossFit got started because it really starts off with, body weight exercises, which a lot of people feel comfortable doing. And then they do throw in a few powerlifting, movements in there. There's the deadlift and whatever.
sure.
So when that exploded, and particularly on the female side, we started to see a huge rush into powerlifting because a lot of times, I mean, CrossFit's a pretty tough sport to maintain for a long time. And I think enough women got in it and started doing some of those ways to realize, oh, like I'm gaining some muscle and some shape, and this is really good. And I like it. And let's see how strong I can get and not worry so much about, the bulkiness of the sport. And so we saw huge rush in powerlifting. I do believe, and then I think that spread out into all women's sports. But I do think
Yeah.
like CrossFit was one of the catalysts for that explosion.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that because I kinda when I was working in, the health clubs, whatever, it was kind of, I remember as a trainer, just I went to Wayne State here in Michigan and
Oh,
studied,
so did my husband.
okay, cool.
He went to
Yeah,
med
yeah.
school there.
N what's you went to med school, you said,
He
there?
did, yeah,
Yeah.
at Wayne State, yeah.
What did he study?
Emergency medicine.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I was in more of the like, just the sports sciences and such, and I remember, like, the only women you'd see when I was a trainer was the one with a trainer, like, over by by the freeway. It's like they would hit a few of the inner outer thigh, maybe the ab
Little
machine.
adductors.
Yeah, yeah, little adductor, and then and it just kinda kept growing to your point with that. Um, and I'm just, like, curious for you because you were, gosh, at least what I would say at least 20 years ahead of that. Like, what was that transition like for you growing up growing up or like, progressing through such like a male dominant, if you will, that kind of, like you said, bro culture environment. Like,
Yeah.
how was that like for you? What did it feel like and how did that work?
Well, I always just still felt that, like, powerlifting really celebrated women,
Mhm.
even way back then, and although, like, when we would compete, like, we would be the first ones to go, we couldn't even really we couldn't even fill up a weight class with the
Sure.
number of women, like, when I first started, it's changed so much, thank goodness, but, you did feel like the act they were getting out of the way before the big guys, came to lift. And that was a little disheartening. I remember like my first IPF World Championships was in Finland, and I think it was 1999. I remember getting there. I'm like, this is the World Championships. It was such a shithole,
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was like
yeah.
totally blew my mind, and my expectations had really come down. Like when you think national championships, world championships, you see on TV, and that was not, the case. So we have really come a long way from us kind of being kind of like a sideshow or just, like we want women in our sports, but we were just kind of like hurried up and gotten out of the way to
Sure.
where now we make, we're in prime time sessions, we're making the same prize money as men, so, and then our events, of course, are like, top notch, like entertainment now, which has been really neat to see that. And I've been, for me, it's funny because I've been pretty strong like my whole life, but
Yeah.
without social media, no one really knows what you're doing.
Right.
So I get a lot of like steroid calls out and stuff for what I can bench press and stuff, but they didn't see in 1999 I was doing 250,
Right.
and I
Right.
was gaining, a few pounds every year for 25 years.
Right.
So
Right.
that's a whole nother tangent there probably, but it is now I think we're something like in USA Powerlifting and in the IPF. I think we're like 45% women, 55% men, where I think really in the beginning it was probably under 20. So, I mean, that's some great progression, I feel like.
Well, it sounds like, as you mentioned, you had a good group when you were getting involved. Like you mentioned, they're really
Mhm.
welcoming, kind of showing you stuff. Um, I can remember at weight station, like the guys taking me in the locker room and like letting me borrow their bench shirt and
Mhm.
the briefs and all that, and just kind of, breaking me into the sport. And they were so like, it was almost, they were so supportive. It was strange. You were kind of like,
Mhm.
what is going on here? Because I just, some of the sports teams I was on, just they were good, but they just weren't at that level. And I really got to feel what a good supportive culture is. My question though is I'm curious, like, what do people outside of that group say, think, family, things like that? Like what was that like?
Well, in the beginning, it was obviously real different. Like my dad was not happy about me lifting weights. He told me no daughter of mine's going to look like a man. But I was in college. I'm like, Dad, you really can't you can't tell me what to do anymore. um, but as in with the change of times, he's like my number one supporter now
That's
because like
great.
he came to realize that this is pretty fun. But
And
I
you're
wouldn't.
kind of okay at it. You're kind of
I'm
decent
kind
at
of
this
all
whole
right.
thing,
Well, I've played out of his
it
four
might have worked
kids,
out.
like I'm the most successful athlete. So, and he always wanted that. So there you go.
Awesome.
But like in the gyms, if we did go to a commercial gyms, or even sometimes out in the grocery store, people would make negative comments about the size of my arms or, things like that. But again, this is back in the early
Right.
90s. And obviously that has really changed a whole 180 where now I have people coming up and say, you look great. Oh, I wish I
Yeah.
had arms like yours. So like a complete flip, which has been really like awesome to see. I'm glad I could have been a part of it, to watch that. You'll always have, I think, generationally, like the older generation is still always gonna have that kind of maybe negative tone to it, but those people will age out eventually.
Well, and it's right, it's kind of like bodybuilding, right? Like 60s and 70s,
Mhm.
whatever. And it just kind of course, like Arnold and all that. And then it just slowly becomes more and more acceptable. And then there's obviously like the kind of freakish side of things that probably will
Mhm.
never be acceptable by,
No.
general culture, but just
Right.
lifting weights in general, being formidable, having strength, like looking strong, like, unfortunately it starts a lot from like Hollywood or like, oh, Jennifer Lopez just did this new workout, and then all of a sudden it trends and then women start picking up weights or whatever the case is, right? It's just, but no, it's really interesting to kind of hear that process and kind of working through that. Um,
Well, it
and that's
certainly helped that my husband was super supportive, like, the
yeah,
whole time. He was always pushing me to be better, like, telling me I could do things I woulda never even thought I could. So he honestly is the driving force behind all of my success. I would have never done it on my I don't think I would have done it on my own. I shouldn't say never, but, he was the one that has, for my whole entire career, been in my court pushing me and telling me not to accept things the way they are, and you can do this, and, like, so I think definitely who you surround yourself by has a huge impact.
that's awesome. And early on, I'm curious, selfishly, I'm going to ask, were you kind of like, well, you're my husband, you're just going to say that? Was that kind of your,
No, because he's like, he was a high school wrestling coach
okay,
for 10 years. He was a really good wrestler. He got invited to the Olympics. He's so they're like for our we have kind of a couple different aspects, but he is like the coaching person and then he's the husband.
sure.
And they're two very different people. And he if you know him, he's a non-bullshitter. Like you can take what he says at face value. He's not going to sugarcoat things and he'll say the tough things when he needs to. So I knew, like if he thought it was
Yeah.
valid.
No, that's awesome. I just ask because sometimes like,
Yeah.
so I have two girls, I have a 10 and 12-year-old, and then my wife, and all three of them sometimes like, well, dad, you just say that, or, and I'm like, no, no, like, dad,
Mhm.
like I saw my 10-year-old the other day, I was talking to her soccer coach. I'm like, dad actually has done graduate studies in human performance and sports, but dad doesn't know anything about 10-year-old soccer to teach her footwork, like teach her like a footwear and agility drill. So I have to get her permission. I have to be very like, if you'd like dad to help you, I could help you. She's like,
Mhm.
okay, okay. So it's just kind of funny, like just the family dynamic. Sometimes it's what I was kind of curious about that. Um, but you did mention something interesting about his wrestling background. Was that in, I'm just curious, was that in Michigan that he
Yeah.
coached or?
Yeah, he
Where,
coached for Rochester High School.
oh, awesome.
Yep,
Okay.
and he wrestled for
Gosh.
Oakland University when he went to college at Oakland University for his undergrad, he wrestled there. He
Oh,
wrestled in the
okay.
Army also, he went to the Army first, so he was an all-Army wrestler, then wrestler at Oakland University, and then, he got invited to the Olympic Games, but he had just got accepted to med school, so he had to make the choice of
Was that
which
in the
one he wanted
90s,
to
would
do.
you say?
Yeah, that was in the '90s.
Okay, because I
Um,
know a guy in the early 2000s that was, uh, he probably wouldn't know him then because it was probably like 10 years later. Yeah, selfishly, I just really super curious, but for listeners and viewers out there, I won't go down my rabbit hole of people we probably know in the same
right?
same circles, but, that's interesting. No, I'll
Yeah.
definitely have to look that up after this because, I know a lot of people in that area, and I wrestled for 2 years in high school, but a lot of my friends were good. I was me, not so much. And then in my 40s, I had the bright idea to start up jujitsu, which was great.
Yeah.
So my daughters and my wife and I, we all kind of they started a little bit after me, and so it's kind of
Mhm.
a fun family thing. As
I
I
love that.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
I kind of kind of noticed that with a lot of your content. Your
Mhm.
sons lift with you, and
Oh,
that
yeah,
looks
it's a
like a pretty
family event.
pretty cool thing. Now, and do they both compete?
Yeah, my oldest one's kinda way more into it than my younger one, and, they're older now. He's 21. He played D1 baseball for a little while and then, quit that and decided to get back into powerlifting. My younger one is playing baseball now in college. So he's more just lifting, so he's the strongest one on his baseball team.
Nice.
But he does
Shocking, right?
compete here and there. Yeah, he competes here and there, but he doesn't love it like, my older one does. My older one will probably, do it for his life, where the younger one will do it, here and there. But it's
Gotcha.
part I don't even think, I've always told them, like, you don't have to compete, but you should lift just to be healthy.
Yeah,
Like, everybody should do it. Like, whether you
right,
have aspirations of getting on a platform or you just want to make sure that you have a healthy everyday life, everybody should be doing it.
right. Yeah, and I I noticed a lot of that in your messaging, and just for those out there too, just, can you talk a little bit about, because 'cause you're a teacher as well, and I'm just how do you work that message into, not with your kids, but then also in your classroom? Just how do you kinda it seems like you layer that into some of your teaching. I'm curious to how you do that.
Oh, for sure. Well, I have the, easy end where they think it's really cool. My students think it's pretty awesome. They're constantly challenging me to arm wrestling and
Oh, I could
picking them
imagine.
up and all sorts of stuff. But I have a couple of clubs, for powerlifting for them. And I really just I share my experiences with them so they can kind of, just see it through a different perspective. Um, and then we do, little lesson plans and things like that. But I try to just integrate it naturally, but it's kind of something fun that's, not math
Sure.
to do. And so they see it through there. And then a lot of our, like at my school, the sports coaches will come to me for workout plans for their athletes, So it is very inviting and nice. And like, I think you, you don't, you make it something that's naturally integrated with everything. You don't have to make it like this specific, separate, extra thing. It
Right,
can be something I always tell my students, like, even if they're playing football or whatever, if you want to get ahead of everybody, get in the gym.
right,
It's the one thing that can set you apart from everybody else, is having that strength,
right.
and they buy into it.
Yeah, and I think, and just I'm sure, I'd like to hear your view on this, but there seems to be a little bit of a straightening of the backbone, if you will, after a few months in the gym, a little more chest in the air, a little more confidence, just a little bit of that mental side of things. I'm curious if you could kind of talk about that, maybe, not only yourself, but in your boys and your students, how that what does that progression look like for people as they're kind of getting involved in a strength training program?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's like some sort of like psychological study on this, but there is a direct connection with your body getting strong and then your brain getting strong at the same time.
Sure.
I don't really know what exactly it is, but and I think it comes down to when you start getting in the gym and you're lifting weights that you never considered that you would ever possibly be able to do, that resets your mental game as far as like, well, maybe I can do this now. Like maybe
Hmm.
I'm capable of more if I can carry all my grocery bags in at one time, maybe I can apply for this promotion at work or
Yeah.
whatever it is. It builds up your confidence starting at this very basic level. It did for me. Like when I was in college, I was very shy, I was meek. I didn't want to go to the grocery store by myself. I would not go out to a fast food restaurant by myself. I was a mess.
Sure.
And once I started hitting those weights, like my confidence just soared. And I've seen that just countless times. Even as a teacher, I had this one girl in my class, and she was absent all the time. She had carpal tunnel syndrome in ninth grade. She was a hypochondriac. I mean, everything was wrong with this girl. She wasn't very good at math. And I got her to show up to my powerlifting club, and
Nice.
like to see the turnaround in her where she became the leader of my club. She got a scholarship for powerlifting in college, graduated, now is coaching her own, athletes. Like, there's just countless stories
Wow.
of how empowering just picking up some dumbbells can do for someone, and men as well. And I always
Right.
laugh because my powerlifting club that I have at school is mostly students that are non-athletes or don't have a specific sport,
Mm.
but they want to get strong.
Mhm.
They're the nerds. They're the
Mhm.
guys that can't dribble, or the ladies that have trouble hitting a ball, but they
Sure.
get into the gym very weak, but all of a sudden they're stronger than everybody else.
Right.
Like, and so it's just this great progression of not only health and strength, but the mind. It's like, I feel like we need to bottle it up and sell it. Like, people would
Absolutely.
pay a lot of money for this.
I would like, I think that's a really good point, because I think especially for like a viewer out there that maybe you know, they feel like they're not, I need to train before I go to the gym. Like,
Yeah.
I can't walk in there looking the way I do, or I don't know what I do, or I'm intimidated. Can you talk as like an expert kind of elite lifter? What is your view when those people come into the gym, and just how to kind of bring down maybe some of those fears for people that are kind of like, this sounds really cool, but I'm not going in there, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the embarrassment factor too. Like, and again, that's low self-confidence, low self-esteem,
Sure.
is that you get in there and feel like people are going to stare at you or
Right.
think you're not knowing what you're doing and make fun of you. And like, we've both, sort of mentioned that powerlifting is this unique culture where it's very encompassing and welcoming. And I think that we all love it so much. We love sharing it,
Right.
with others. So it's our favorite thing to talk about. But really, the only way to get them in there is just constant encouragement. Like, go with them, find a buddy to go with you.
Yep.
Um, you know, Most people in the gym are worried about what they're doing, not
Yep.
what you're doing. Nobody's in there going like, "What's she doing in here?"
Yep. Yep.
You go in there like, "Oh, would you like to use the bench? Would you like to work in with me? Can I spot for you?"
Right.
So
Right.
you just have to really get over that first hurdle. Of course, you could have a trainer for the first few days if you need to really have someone hold your hand, to get you in there. But I have found, like with most people, if I just keep mentioning it, or offer them to come to the gym here, once they get in, it's good to go.
Well, and I think anything that's hard to do, and there's people that are doing it and they're mastering it and are doing it for a long time. Those people that one might be intimidated by, to understand, to do something that difficult and that hard repeatedly for years, you have a passion for it. And when you have a passion
Mhm.
for something, you want to share it. Like, I
Yeah.
think of like a parallel when I got into jujitsu. I was intimidated a little bit. I was like, what do I do? And like every high level guy, not only do they just want to have fun choking me and practicing and stuff, let me practice my moves on the new big guy, the new
Yeah.
strong guy. Like, let me show him. It was cool though. It was very inviting. I had this similar feeling. So I think for those out there is like, I trained my entire life since I was 12 years old, had the Arnold encyclopedia and the
Mhm.
cement weights in my basement. And I'll never forget going to yoga. And the yoga teacher
Mhm.
is like, Joe, nobody cares. They're not
Yeah.
looking at you. Like, they're doing a vinyasa flow, which those who don't know, it's, they start playing the music and everyone's just doing their thing and in their little chair. And I'm like,
Freeform.
what is going on? Like, I'm like, I'm used to like this, like all
Yeah.
this, like they look so like elegant. And they're like, Joe, no one cares. No one's looking at you. If you do
Oh,
there is no wrong flow or right flow. I'm like, oh. And like I said, I had the same thing in so many different disciplines. Now I will say swimming was a little different, because that's how I met my wife, and I think she got a kick out of me and my terrible swimming. So my wife's been coaching for about 20 years, and she's had a lot of successes with coaching and such. And so I do think that one, I might say she may have had some fun poking at me a little bit.
well, that was flirting though.
Yeah, 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 exactly. That's her. Yeah, it's actually funny because I started. I was teaching a class because a friend of mine stopped. I was in management at the time, so I wasn't training anymore. So I filled in. She was in it, and then I wanted to get into triathlons. Like again, I have these bonehead ideas, like big 250-pound guy.
Ugh.
I'm going to go do a triathlon. So I jumped into swim, and she was running that department. She's like, "Oh, I'll give you lessons," and blah blah. Short of the long, the day after our first date, she was training me for months. I was flip turning, doing my deal. I was actually getting pretty good. The day after our first date, she's like, "All right, hit the wall." I'm like, "No." She's like, "Are you kidding me? The timer?" Like, she's like, "All this work?" I'm like, "I can't do it. I just can't listen to you anymore." I'm like, it just changed. I mean, there, I still, I still did let her push me, but the dynamic changed a little bit. But
Mhm.
hey, she got me to stop sinking, which was a miracle in itself, which I
Right.
appreciated. Um, but yeah, I just kind of going back to some of um, the club you're talking about and the training. There's so many things going on in my mind that I kind of want to go a little deeper on. But I think the first is like, what does it look like now? Like in a how do you let me rephrase this? How do you take a new lifter under your care and kind of help bring them along? Like, what does that look like?
You mean like just like a one-on-one or just when they get in my club?
Yeah, I would say either of the two, but let's say the club even.
Yeah. Well, there in the beginning, when we start our club, and usually like I usually start with like, I don't know, 35 kids, but by the end we'll be down to like 20 or
Sure.
maybe 18. Because the one thing about powerlifting is it's not easy.
Yeah.
Like, you have to wanna be in there and push yourself and make things hurt and be happy about it, you know?
Right.
So,
Right.
it's not an easy sport, by any means. But in the beginning, it's a lot of technique because, you can really get yourself hurt doing this.
Hmm.
I take my job very seriously. Like, I would really be destroyed if one of my kids got hurt lifting weights. To
Sure.
me, like as a mom too, like they're trusting me with these kids to make sure that they're okay and they're safe. And there is a lot of bad things that can happen in a gym, especially when you have a bunch of kids in there
Yeah.
and you got plates and you're in a small space and like, I'm real nervous about that, to be honest with you.
Sure.
So and it's very structured in the beginning, like it's very technique oriented. We're working on different parts. I don't let them do any like heavy loads at all for probably the first month and a half. It's all technique, 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 and working on certain things. And they get used to me. Like, I think at first, like it's hard when you're telling someone to change something or do something because they feel like they're
Right.
doing it wrong. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of establish this relationship with them where I'm not telling you you're doing wrong. I'm just helping you get to where you need to go. So a
Right.
lot of it's building this trust and this relationship with them. So a lot of times we spend a lot of times talking, working. I'm very like trying to be very sensitive to their emotional well-being, things like that. Because really, like I said, you're establishing a relationship, and so you have to put a lot of time, a lot of effort into the relationship you have with them, and then trusting them to stay in technique and be smart about how they training. So that's like the majority of the beginning of it. And then like once you get them to that state, it's stinking easy. Like
Right. Right.
it's like a well-oiled machine. You establish the gym rules and how things go. They buy into it.
Yeah.
We do a lot with spotting and helping each other because you want to create that team aspect.
Yeah.
So like that guy is relying on you to not let this bar drop on their face. Don't
Right.
be listening to your phone or looking around. Like, and so once we kind of get all that going, it's me showing up, encouraging them, giving them small little tips here and there, but they're basically running the show on their own. And
Sure.
that's always fun when we get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it like a cycle? Like, is there a certain phase during the year, and then they take a break? Or like, I would imagine, does it end like when the school year ends? Is it kind of running in
Yeah.
parallel with school?
It runs throughout the school year, and then some are coming in and out for various sports too. So, like, I'll have some in the fall, but not some in the winter, and then they'll come back in the spring. So it's kind of like a rotation. And I have a very loose program, that we're running and they're recording, and we're looking at their gains and things like that. But it's kind of like, yeah, everyone's kind of rotating in and out based on their own schedules, and some want to compete and some don't. So
Sure.
the ones that wanna compete, the rest are there supporting them, which they enjoy doing, and the ones that don't, totally good, but usually they eventually get the little bug to wanna do it.
Yeah, there's a the local school here, my wife actually just recently retired from as a swim coach, but I was doing some volunteer work in the weight room, and they have a good coach there. But whenever I was there, because they have like weightlifting class and all this, and it's funny you mentioned like safety and setting those expectations, because mine was like, before we start anything, before you touch a weight, we clean the weight room, we organize it, and then before
Mhm.
we leave, like we clean it and organize it. Every
Oh,
single weight's
yeah.
racked, everything's there, because as busted ankles, stuff dropping on feet, like this, and especially with kids, right? Like they just don't
Yeah.
think about they're okay stepping over stuff, and it's like these are
Yeah.
like iron big poles of steel. Like we can't mess around
Yeah.
with that.
For me, there's like a little bit of that too, like because I am well known as this world champion, I have this fear of like, my kid got hurt in her class.
Yeah,
She pushed him too far or, so I'm always kind of a little bit worried about the negative too. That kind of drives some of that.
sure,
So
sure.
so far we've been pretty successful. So
Yeah, and it seems like you've been doing that for some time, so I'd imagine at this point it's is pretty well received in the community, and a lot of people kind of come check that out, I would imagine.
yeah, yeah, that's pretty great.
Now, as far as you were talking before about like the culture and powerlifting and things, do you find more and more non-competitors out there engaging with your content, or wanting to learn more about just simply getting stronger just from seeing this such a high level, of powerlifting? Do you find that that's kind of attracting their, I guess, average person to kind of start to want to embark in some more strength training programs and things?
Yeah, it's kinda hard to tell. You've got, the trolls in there that just wanna say negative things, but luckily, I don't have a whole lot of that, but a lot of it is, like, I think probably your average gym goer is kinda more but what I love about my, group of people that follow me is, they all, like, comment with, like, real responses and suggestions and experiences. It's not like just a little heart. I, try to create some engagement, and I have really good engagement among my community of people. Like like I might put something out and they're like, "Oh, but I tried it this way and it worked really great," or, "When I do this, this is what happens." So, it's like a really good sharing. And to me, like that is like just so cool. Like you almost feel like you know them a little bit just from
Sure,
the back and forth. I don't know that I have too many like high level powerlifters that are or weight trainers or whatever like that are responding a whole lot. More of it's like just people that love weight training in general.
sure. And for a lot of people maybe out there that don't know, can you talk a little bit about, I guess, first your own experiences with some of like the health benefits, have them be, you know, blood work, physically, hormone health as life progresses, things like that. Like what are some things you've in mental health? What are some things you've noticed yourself just by having this strength training in your life?
Um, well, I mean, it's kind of funny because like I don't like I feel like I can do anything I put my mind towards, whether
Mhm.
it's, working around the house, carrying things, like whatever. I rock climbing, jumping, whatever. So like to me, like it's giving me this sense of security that I don't doubt myself when I want to try things. At 52, I started competing when I was 27. So I'm 50,
Mhm.
I'll be 52 in a few weeks here.
Okay.
Um, I've always been super healthy. Like I've had a few injuries throughout my career. A lot of it was in water sports though, because I love it. But like, I mean, I really like, and I don't know if it attributes to or not, but I haven't had any perimenopause, no menopause, nothing.
Yeah,
I feel just as strong as I did 10, 20 years ago. I'm still hitting PRs. I'm still progressing in the weight room. And then my blood work has always been great. So, you know, I can't believe I'm gonna be 52. Like, because I look at other 52-year-olds and I'm like, I just don't feel old is
sure,
what I wanna say, and I have to think that most of that is weight training, and of course, nutrition plays, a big role in that as
sure.
well. But, I kinda am just, like, waiting, like, I hope this just keeps going.
Right,
Like, I get
right.
a lot of people wanting to know about hormone health and menopause. I get lots of messages about that, and I'm like, I don't have any experience with it yet, so I just can't help you, but knock on wood, like, hopefully it just stays away.
Stay away.
Yeah, and I have to think, that the healthy lifestyle, has a lot to do with that.
Well, and the literature definitely seems to support that for sure. And one kind of interesting like fact I remember in college too that came up was the number one indicator between assisted living and non-assisted living, like the number one difference is if the person does any type of resistance training or not
Mhm.
later in life. And so I used to always mention that to especially, well, I shouldn't say especially, it was to everybody, but a lot of women that were maybe 50 and up, 40 and up, whatever the case was, and they're, well, I don't want to look like that. I don't really want to train hard. I'm like, that's no, 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 no. Like, this is just like general lifestyle stuff. Like, even if it
Mhm.
was if you look at like CDC guidelines, I think there's some stat out there that 90% of Americans don't reach that minimum threshold of the CDC guidelines, which is not elite powerlifter training program, right?
Yeah,
It's very,
right.
very basic, but
Yeah.
the health benefits, and then obviously there's a point of diminishing returns where you're doing it for, competition elite level or whatever the case may be, but there's definitely, quite a long runway of benefits from getting into a good resistance, good protocol, good program, and just having consistency and growth there. And I just find it so cool because, we were talking earlier about as you're lifting and people look, but I can remember like my wife, she was a college athlete, but didn't do a lot of lifting and used to kind of think people look at her. And now she'd be like, yeah, I saw the young guys like in the corner looking at me because I put another plate on the leg press today. She's like, it felt kind of good. And, she's in her
Yeah.
mid 40s, and I'm just like, yeah, I get it.
Let's go,
So
girl. It is really neat. We are seeing a huge wave of women in their 40s and 50s, getting
right.
into powerlifting. And I think that some of it was like back when our 20s, we were discouraged,
Sure.
from being in the weight room. But now we're seeing this surgence because it's way more accepting and inviting. We know that it keeps your joints, lubricated. It's good for your bone density, all that sort of good stuff. So they start this resistance training, and then we find this powerlifting. A lot of my seminars I do now is women in their 40s and 50s, and so I just think it's so amazing that you can still reap so many health benefits starting
Right.
later in life. Like, there's
Yep.
no, like, you're too old to get started on that. They did a study, like, in Australia years ago with 70-year-olds, and they started 70-year-olds weight training, and, like, the health benefits were, like, astronomical, and then in lifting in the IPF, the Australia team was dominating the masters 70 and over. Because they got into powerlifting after they started doing this study, and like they have this huge stronger age group now, which I just think is amazing. Like, it's just never too late. I mean, that's just like, that's just so neat.
Yeah. And I think too, even like with the, maybe powerlifting is or isn't for somebody, but just getting involved in strength training, like maybe the competition is or isn't, or maybe they don't know. But I just, when you were talking about some of that, I was thinking about, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rochester Performance Gym in Michigan. A couple of their guys have been on table talks and such, and really, really great guys. But my point in bringing that up was I went to their meet in last year in the fall, I want to say, and there were a couple women that would be your prototypical like type that you would assume would be uncomfortable in a weight room. They
Mhm.
were overweight, never worked out, but when they were announcing them, like the novice division, like, and they were doing awards and stuff, they were talking about how like, hey, she started training just a year ago, and these are
Yeah.
women, like I said, in their 40s, and the pinnacle, you know bless the heart of the trainer, like so awesome that was the goal. He's like, hey, you're going to compete in a year. Like, what do you mean compete? I just want to learn how to
Mhm.
like use these weights. And then to
Yeah.
see them like in front of a whole room of like
Mhm.
massive human beings like cheering them on, it was just like the coolest thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I was really glad because um not only did one guy hit the third largest total, I believe it was, at the meet. So my daughter got to experience that, which I thought was pretty cool. And the whole place erupted. And she's just like, whoa. But also to
Mm.
see the community. We talk
Yeah.
a lot about, my wife talks about culture for the girls and having them experience different things. And I was like, this is also another
Yes.
culture to
100%.
experience and just
Yeah.
that comfortability.
Yeah, it's amazing. We had our state meet just a little while ago, and one of the ladies, I have this ladies group will come over once in a while. They call themselves the Deadlift Divas. They're in their 60s. But she
Nice.
was pulling for a state master's record, and everybody, it was a long pull too, like one of those real long grinders. Everyone's on the chairs screaming and yelling and encouraging her through this lift. And I just was like, this is so awesome.
That's
Like,
cool.
it doesn't get better than this.
Well, and like, how many times later in life do you have a room full of adults cheering for you
Not
unless you're a
never.
professional athlete, right? It's
Yeah,
like, so it's
never.
like, go get yours, have fun. No one,
Yeah.
it's you against you. So, you can't control who shows up, and just have fun regardless of the final outcome of placing. Like, if you're
Yeah.
just getting better and progressing, like that's cool. Um, I did want to talk a little bit about like your seminars, because I think I was curious to common themes out there. Like, what are, maybe your top one or two themes, questions you get, or maybe things that people can improve on that you're covering a lot in these seminars when you're providing coaching.
Well, the seminars are either like sometimes I'll just do a bench press seminar, and sometimes I'll do a three lift seminar. So it kind of depends
Just
on which we're doing. But I mean, with the bench press, that's easy. There's the same stuff over and over again, really, with that one, as far as, everyone's hands are too close. The bar path isn't over their wrists. They don't have leg drive. They don't get in a good arched position. So, there's a lot of that. And like with seminars too, it doesn't matter. Like I did this seminar last May in California, and it was with this ladies group, and they said, we are only letting like our intermediate lifters like into this, so it's not a beginners. And
mm,
so I'm like, okay, they had to send in a video, they had to review whether that they were at this level to be in this seminar, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I kind of adjusted how I did a lot of my stuff, because they were supposed to be, into it.
right.
They've got some experience.
Sure.
And at the end I kicked myself, because I should have just started with the basics. And I know
Yeah.
that as a teacher, I always start with the basics,
Yep.
but I didn't on this one. And it just, with lifting, like I was telling someone the other day, you're never not tweaking your technique.
Yeah.
Like you never just got it down, you're good. There's
Yep.
always something that changes. There's always something you can do better. There's always little tweaks. And so even just going back to the very beginning, because I think like sometimes we get lifting and we forget about, one of the reasons I like doing the seminars, because it reminds me of
Right.
all the basic things I should be doing when I'm lifting that I kind of forget about because I've been doing it for so long. So I think like the basics are, for everybody. Everyone should warm up with a bar. Like you don't
Sure.
need to put 135 on. Get your joints going with the bar. Like
Right.
there's no shame in that.
And is there any tips maybe for the audience out there, just a couple takeaways? I know it's not the same as a seminar, and it's kind of more, there's nuance to everybody's coaching, but maybe like, I know like, I interviewed Matt Wenning a couple years ago, like he has like the Wenning warm-ups and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Like for you, is there a specific either warm-up or maybe something, a quick tip, like on the bench press, like a common kind of adjustment that people could make?
Well, so for warm-ups, we have a rule, and that is you have to do as many warm-ups as decades you are old.
Okay. I like
So
that.
I have to do 5, minimum of 3. I do find some people over warm up.
Okay.
They're doing like 10 sets before they're getting to their working sets. It's not a
Sure.
workout, it's a warm up. So that's kind of our like our standard saying. We have them on our gym wall. We have all our little things on the gym wall. It says,
Nice.
"Don't waste your warm ups. Go to the bar with a plan. Your setup should not be comfortable. Everything in powerlifting is uncomfortable. If you're
Yep.
feeling comfortable in your setup, you ain't doing it right.
Right.
Um, Actively take the bar down. Train with partners that will push you, and be critical of your lifting. Those are
Nice.
like our guidelines, our gym rules, golden rules.
Got it. Yeah, and I think like you were saying, the basics, because I mean, I think I deadlifted for, like I said, I started lifting when I was 12, so probably somewhere in my mid-teens, and it was like we I did a podcast with Ed Cohen and met him a few times at different events, and just kind of got to know him a little bit. And like he spent so much time on just your feet. Like just your feet walking up to the bar. And I knew that that's what I needed to focus on, or what, like that was helpful, but it was just like here's somebody who's shattered all kinds of records, and like they're
Yeah.
talking the ankles down. There's like
Mhm.
95% of their body we haven't even got to yet. And you spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes on foot positioning, and like you just said, like the
Mhm.
uncomfortableness getting down into the deadlift, like how tight everything should feel. I think a lot of people, to your point, when they're starting, they think it feels uncomfortable, so I'm doing it wrong, and then that's
Right.
why they get that like Gumby type
Mhm.
form and the rounded back or whatever, you know. And so,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Because a lot of people, like, you can get hurt doing this, if
right.
it feels like if you're feeling I always think that with, like, deadlifts, I have to one of the things I talk to my students about is, like, it's okay if your back is sore. It's
Mhm.
muscle soreness, but people freak out and think they wrecked their back,
Right.
because they, increase their muscle strength or mass in their lower back. That's good. That's not, like, a dangerous thing, and so there
Right.
is kind of like that kind of separating what is a bad feeling and what is this is going to get you stronger feeling.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. That's a good point. I think for people out there too to, check with your coaches on that feeling if you are a little worried about it. But also don't overreact, and just kind of understand the difference between like an injury and just soreness. So
Right.
um
Because if you're not uncomfortable and set up correctly, that's a pathway for injury.
right.
There's a weakness in your setup where something's going to give.
Yep.
So you have to have that uncomfortability tightness to protect yourself to be in the right position and handle the weight correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something I personally struggle with because I wanna not warm up as much. I did change this a
Mhm.
couple years ago, but I wanna not warm up like I wanna warm up like I when I was 18 or 20 and,
Yeah.
just get after it. But
Yeah,
it's
we
like,
just hit a few and you
yeah.
hit it, but
Oh,
now
yeah,
I'm down
now
here
I have a
20 minutes
whole
ahead of time with bands.
oh,
I never
yeah,
used to do mobility, now I'm doing mobility work,
100%.
warm-up work.
I was just gonna say I have this whole dynamic routine. I've had people come
Yep.
to me in the gym and be like, "Hey, man, you're a pretty big guy, but I never see you lift weights. Like, what's the deal?" I was like,
You have been here long enough.
"Yeah, you gotta give me a
Stay
half hour,
longer.
bro. Like, I just I just wheeled into my wheelchair. Like,
Yeah.
let me get warmed up
It
here."
is
So,
neat though, like when I'm at powerlifting events, you'll see all the young kids out there with their bands and
yep,
stuff. It's not an old person's thing. I mean, it's just something with, sports, and science, it's progressing. And so
right,
we're learning how to do things better all the time. So it's not necessarily that you're an old person, you need to do it.
sure,
Everybody should be doing that because the
absolutely.
science has evolved.
Yeah, and the stuff I was doing as, in high school and college as an athlete is the same stuff I'm doing now, which I just
Mhm.
stopped for a while and just realized like, okay, I need to do this. But um I did want to hit on a couple topics. Just I know you got a busy schedule and I want to hit some of these things before we break, but we talked about science. I'm curious to just a little bit about like nutrition or supplementation. What are some of like your cornerstones as the science has progressed? Things that you say, hey, like this has helped me, or these are things that people should work into their diet, or maybe one or two, if needed, supplements that have helped with recovery,
Mhm.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I'm way into that. Like we said when I was younger, like I would eat whatever. I'd go out and party. I didn't care. But then I got in my mid-30s. I was like, okay, there's something to this nutrition stuff.
Sure.
Um, I think the biggest thing for me was like really eliminating a lot of processed food in my diet.
Hmm.
It's not all gone, but it's not a lot,
Yeah.
and when I say processed, I mean like protein bars or, protein shakes, things like that. But it is amazing how much the food can create inflammation in our bodies
Yep.
and just I mean, I mean, when you look at here and you go into Europe, like it's so different. Like
Right.
when we were in England for the Worlds, they were making fun of us for the food that we allow people to eat in
Yep.
the United States. They were laughing at us. But it really, eating well takes time, but it's so worth it,
Yeah.
and you have to kind of get through, that stuff tastes good because you're used to eating it.
Right.
And I've had to change my mindset around really is that I'm not eating for a pleasurable experience. I'm
Yeah.
eating to fuel my body
Yes.
correctly.
Yep.
And of course, you have to eat things that are palatable,
Right.
and that you enjoy eating to an extent, like you're not gagging while you eat it. But that whole mindset change really was huge for me. Um, and then once you stop eating that food, it tastes terrible if you try to go back to it. You
Right.
taste like it's almost like you can taste the chemicals in the plastic, and it's just so the havoc that stuff, the dyes that we don't really consider. We just think, oh, I feel fine.
Right.
But you really don't know how good you could feel if you weren't eating those things.
Yeah.
So for me, a big flip was, and I didn't eat terribly, but I ate a lot of processed food just because it was easy.
Sure.
So that was a huge like game changer for me, and how I felt and how I performed in the gym was really focusing on eating good meats and veggies.
Yeah.
So that was big. And then I do take a lot of supplements, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. I mentioned my husband's a physician. He does a lot of research on, supplementation, what's good for you. So, I mean, we do a lot. I do a lot for joint health. Like I take a glucosamine chondroitin. I take
Mm.
hyaluronic acid in pill form, turmeric for inflammation, and then of course fish oil,
Sure.
calcium, because I'm older now, so you have to have the calcium, vitamin D.
Sure. Yeah.
But then in the morning, I do the SSP collagen peptides has been
Okay.
really nice on my joints. I take that with my creatine. I mean, you can't say enough about creatine right
Creatine.
now. I
Right.
don't think, with what's going on in the science world, as far as not it being a sports supplement, but something
Right.
that's so great for your brain.
Right.
My dad has bad dementia right now. I've got
Mm.
him taking it. Everyone older in my family's got some sort of memory problem. So I'm like, I've been taking this stuff for like
Yeah.
18 years. I am really hoping that these studies are correct. So I've always been, and I do notice, that's probably the number one thing I notice in my workouts is if I'm on the creatine.
Yeah.
People get worried about it being like a steroid or something like that, but it's just something that naturally occurs in meat.
Yeah.
And they say for women, it's in particular because women in general don't consume the amount of
Right.
red meat that a male does. So
Yep.
for women in particular, for brain health, you should be doing it. And I feel like I can really power through my workouts when I'm on that. So I put the creatine and the collagen peptides in my coffee in the morning, and I take the
Yeah.
magnesium before I go to bed. So
Yeah.
there's a lot.
Yeah. No, I have a blend, a magnesium blend I do to help me like at night with kind of relaxation and all that, and just
Mhm.
making sure I'm getting enough of my diet. And yeah, I think creatine's a big one. I mean, I know, again, the details slip my mind of the study, but there's plenty of studies out there, as you mentioned, but the one with, like if someone had a really rough night of sleep and they had to get up and go give a presentation or do something, and they took creatine, and the cognition and memory recall, like how much it improved from that supplementation, so it's definitely, to your point, something that's well studied, well researched, very safe. And I think for women too, the one thing I'll bring up is women, and I'm sure you've experienced this, but with a lot of women will get wrapped up in a scale, and as we know,
Yeah.
healthy muscles, you have like the piece of steak that's nice and juicy and thick and full of nutrients and fluid is really healthy, and then you have like beef jerky, which is really dry. Well,
And
of
full of
course,
sugar.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so like, as we know, like creatine can bring that good fluid into the muscle. So, and they're lifting, and they're like, well, the scale is staying the same or it's going up, and it's like,
Yeah.
just give it time, give it
Yeah,
time.
that's a culture shift really, because I mean, for my generation growing up, you wanted to
Yep.
look like a supermodel. You wanted to weigh the least amount of weight you possibly could,
Right.
and that was considered pretty,
Right.
or admirable. So I always say, you want to go with how your clothes fit and how you look. It does.
Exactly.
I mean, I think I was like, I did check my weight all the time in high school. I can tell you I was 114 pounds
Hmm.
because I checked it constantly.
Yeah.
Now I do it because of my weight class, but I'm 144 pounds, which probably seems like heavy for a 5'5" person, but I'm not,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah.
So the numbers don't are meaningless.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a number, and it varies. The more muscle you have, the more it's going to vary too. If you're,
Mhm.
dehydrated or a little flat, and so on, and it's just, you just don't worry about that. Focus on the look and feel, as you mentioned. Um, yeah, just as we're kind of winding down here, I wanted to just touch base on what do you have planned coming up? I think I saw something with a Greece seminar you have. Is that
Yeah, we've got 2 spots left. We're doing a Greece seminar in Crete in October 10th through 15th, and it's a powerlifting vacation.
nice?
So we did one in Costa Rica last summer, and it was so much fun. I did another one in October, and then I'm going to be launching another one for Portugal pretty soon for next
Wow.
summer. And so what is so much fun about it is like, yes, we're learning to powerlift and everyone loves powerlifting, but the friends you make. It's like going
Right.
to camp and you just get to meet all these really interesting people from all over the place. I still talk to the people from my first one I did in Costa Rica. So it's like a community aspect. Like it's just it just fills me with such happiness. Like it's
Yeah.
just like there's so much negativity and ugliness in this world. And then when you get to this, you're like, life can be beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, you're seeing these beautiful things, you're doing these amazing experiences with people you just met of all different cultures, all different, religious backgrounds, whatever. And you're coming together for this moment. Like I love that. So I do have the trips coming up. I have a seminar in Wyoming in September.
Okay.
I think that's almost sold out also. And then I'm not sure after that. I just kind of roll with it however they come. I usually do one in California in May.
Yeah. Because your first competition, was that in Venice Beach? Did I read that correctly, or was
Well,
that
that's
just
where I saw
you
powerlifting.
saw your first one?
That's where I discovered it.
Gotcha.
My
Gotcha.
very first one was up in Michigan. It was in a gym up there. I want to say it was called like the Detroit Classic or something. It was in
Okay.
1999, so it was a
Okay.
long time ago.
I'll have to
Um,
I'll have to look that up because it
Yeah,
was
well,
very
I don't know if you could find it anywhere. It was
y
before the internet.
that's
Like,
true, that's
we weren't
true.
recording anything. There was no Google, YouTube, no nothing. It was just my results were in the back of Powerlifting USA magazine.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. What city was it in? Do you remember that by any
No,
chance?
I could look it up because it'll be on my spreadsheet that my husband made for me.
Nice. Yeah,
It
no, I
was in the
just
Detroit area though. It was a school around Detroit. And
yeah,
then
no,
I
I
did
just
one on Metro Beach. They had one on Metro Beach
yep.
one year. I did that. I had broke my ankle. And so I was in like a cast. I was hobbling up to the bench, lifting under the sun, but it was a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
they had the bench at the beach thing, right?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
lifted in that.
yeah, I went to a few of those. I bet you I was at some of the same
Probably.
ones.
Isn't that funny? How
Yeah,
serendipitous.
yeah. That was like because that was the early 2000s,
Mhm.
'cause I was like a junior lifter, if you will, at that time, and, so, yeah, it's just interesting because yeah, there was one at Metro that was like a, full powerlifting meet, and then at the bench at the beach, there's a few of those, but, yeah, no, good stuff, so,
Yeah.
any other like, what are some other ways people could, find you, connect with you? Obviously, we'll have a lot of that in the show notes and things, but
Yeah.
what are some
I
ways
have a
people can engage?
I have a great YouTube channel. It's 132 pounds of power. My first weight class was 132. Now they've
Okay.
changed the weight classes 100 times since then, but I couldn't get rid of the name. But I have all sorts of tutorials on there for squat, bench, deadlifts, training variations. So it's kind of like just a good resource to go to.
Yeah.
And then I'm Jen Thompson, 132 on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook's 132 pounds of power. You can find me there. I have a lot of fun with social media. I really enjoy it. I like putting out like informational content, but then I like doing kind of fun, spoofy stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of it's I will definitely, encourage people to check it out because I think a lot of it's, like you said, educational, but also engaging and fun because there's different, whoever does your editing does a good job because you're
He
cutting from
does.
different scenes and all that, and that's
Mhm.
actually something we're working on is, just bringing on kinda more expanding, like, our media team because we wanna help a lot of people, and you have to, you have to be engaging and also have good content. You can't
Right.
just have one or the other a lot of
Well, that's
times,
when
right?
my social media exploded last January. I decided like I need to up my game. And
Yeah.
so I started working with a content creator and an editor. And now I just work with the editor. But it exploded because I guess I tried to learn how to do that video editing and
Oh, yeah.
stuff. I'm just not good at it. Like I just, it's not my forte. I like learning new things. I can work CapCut a little bit, but
Yep.
I can't do anything near what Jason Cool does for me.
Oh, yeah. No, I just sent something literally just last night. I thought I made something pretty cool in Canva, and my social media manager, she's newer, and she's like, "Do you mind if I make a few tweaks?" I'm like, "Yeah, work your magic." Comes back completely different,
Yeah.
way
Like,
better. I'm like,
and
"From now
just,
on, I'm just sending it to you in a Google Doc. You just
yeah.
make it look fancy
I
and
just don't have
awesome."
that skill. I have the ideas. I'm like, this is my idea. This is what I'm going for. Here's the videos. And then they magically,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
the only
Yeah.
thing is like with technique things, sometimes I have to be like, no, this needs to be this way or this way. But, it's been fun. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
for me, like the social media, all that sort of stuff is just kind of like a passion project. It's something I enjoy doing. It's not anything I want to do full time.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because it's like people, I think I grew up, you were a little bit before me in the evolution of that, but I grew up with like MySpace and,
Mhm.
I didn't get on social media forever. So it's
Yeah, I didn't
definitely,
either.
yeah. So it's
I
definitely
think I
because a lot
think
of people now grew up with it and it's just
yeah,
normal to them to where to
yeah,
people like us and others, in that kind of that time period, it's just like, it's just interesting and it seems like that's really growing too. And I think it's a really good way to reach people, educate them, inspire
yeah,
them. There's a lot of good. So definitely everybody out there for the viewers out there, check out, definitely check out Jen's platforms.
yeah.
Even
And
if
I
you're not
do have
looking to
a
power.
training app also, like, if anyone's interested in the programs that I run,
Oh,
I have
nice.
Thompson's Gym program app. It's in the App Store or online, and so I have, like, I think 12 programs on there. It's the ones I actually use for competition, but there's also, like, if you just wanna get in the gym, you just wanna get your bench better, it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Lots of metrics. I love the metrics at the end of like you PR'd today, or your RPE level was this, or the intensity, or you lifted 2,000 pounds by the end of your workout today.
Well, and it's just I always share to people, and I say this for myself too, is like because sometimes like I don't, yeah, it might be cheap. I don't want to pay for something. I'm like, I don't really want to do that. But it's like it's such a good investment after
Mhm.
whenever it's an app, it's a coaching program, it's engaging in that, it for the rest of your life. And then a lot of us, right? Like in a lot of people listening to this, they're generally high performers, whether in business, big families, they got other community responsibilities. It's like, why not just have an experts app? It just tells you what to do. Just walk in. You
Right.
don't have to think, shut your brain off, just go do your
Mhm.
thing. It's kind of like having your clothes like all set up like the week
Agree.
before because
Yeah,
you just
I
put them
love
on and
it.
go. It's the same for
Yeah.
training. Is
Well,
like
I think
just
it's motivational too, though. Like if you can look at that, I look at my what I'm doing for the day, the morning. I don't lift to the afternoon, but I look at it in the morning so I can motivate myself throughout the day and kind of mentally prep for what
right.
we're doing in the afternoon. I think that's like a huge key to success.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I know you have a packed week ahead. So we'll definitely get this episode out soon and just really appreciate you jumping on and sharing all the information for everybody again out there. Just definitely check out Jen and her app and follow her on social and YouTube. A lot of great resources out there. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. And thanks, Jen. We'll see you.
Thanks. I appreciate it.